I'm here with Mr. Alex Budden, the Vice President of External Affairs at Africa Oil in Nairobi, Kenya. Africa Oil is a Canadian oil and gas company with assets in Kenya and Ethiopia. Alex, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to speak to me today as we're here at the Institute for Human Rights and Businesses workshop on enhancing community engagement in Kenya's extractive sector. So thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to give any reflections on the workshop and how the Nairobi process is working from a company perspective.
I think the Nairobi process is an important part of the wider discussion that's going on in East Africa and certainly Kenya at the moment. I think forums where civil society, private sector, government can come together to talk as openly as possible about these issues is really important. Too many people are entrenched. It may be misperception, it may be misinformation, or it may be just miscommunication by those who need to pass information across. I think companies need to be better at doing that. Governments certainly need to be better at doing that. And I think civil society also has to open up and recognise that some of the issues that are going on in Kenya are not because of extractive companies, they're because of issues within Kenya that now oil and gas companies are having to deal with. And I think there's a relationship there that can be developed so that we all achieve the same objectives.
Can you tell us what currently informs Africa Oil's community engagement work? I mean, are there any specific requirements that you look at under the law or in specific contracts?
For Africa Oil, community engagement is not so much something that is stipulated within our contracts or within the law, but it's an essential component of our wider stakeholder management. Communities are a key part of that, but of course there are other wider groups as well, be they government, be they civil society, be they the media. And of course, as a commercial company, we have our investors, our shareholders as well, that are key stakeholders in what we do. So our approach to community engagement is very much twofold. It's a risk management approach, but it's also a added value approach. So from a risk management point of view, it's very simply, if we don't get community relations right, if we don't have a social license to operate, as opposed to a legal license to operate, then actually we can't do our business. And that affects our ability to explore for oil, it affects our ability to raise value for the company and to help Kenya as a country on its path to economic development through oil and gas revenues. So it's essential from a bottom line risk management point of view that we engage with the communities. But I think the added value, the opportunity side of it is more important in some ways, because I think everyone knows that the oil and gas and the extractive sector over the last 30 years probably hasn't done things in a way that most people would want them to do. I think that has been changing. I think for Africa Oil, as a smaller company, having been in the region for 10 years or so, we've tried very hard to focus on those issues from the start. Community engagement for us is about a social license to operate, but it's also about how do we ensure that the communities recognise that we're there to add value. We want the local communities to be our workers, we want them to be our managers, we want them to be our providers of goods and services. We can only do that if we have a relationship with them and if they trust that relationship. So I think when we look at the range of community engagement activities, we perhaps used to define it as CSR or community development, but that's really only one portion of what we do. Nowadays, it's about understanding what the concerns of those communities are, why do they feel our operations may have a negative impact, and what can we do to minimise those? Why do they feel perhaps excluded from the supply chain or the business opportunities that are coming up, and what can we do to help them with that? I think if we were just following the word of the law, then we would always sort of issue contracts to those that could offer them at the best value and at the lowest price, and that would be meeting our legal requirements. But I think we recognise that coming into somewhere like northern Kenya, there hasn't been the investment, there hasn't been the training, there hasn't been the business skills development in those areas for decades, if not hundreds of years. And therefore, we need to work with the community so that they can maximise their benefits as well. Yes, that adds additional cost to us, and maybe that takes a little bit longer than securing goods, services or workers from elsewhere, but it's a long-term investment. And I think the investment is the key word here. Perhaps if you talked to companies like ours 10 years ago, then community development CSR projects were considered a cost, a necessary cost maybe, but a cost nonetheless. I think today it's much more about investment. So it's no longer just about building a school or a borehole, although those things are still done because actually the communities want them to be done. So we do those, but we do recognise that those are short-term issues. We also want to invest long-term, so we're looking at technical and vocational training centres, we're looking at enterprise development centres to train business people in how they can access their opportunities, but we're also working with organisations like the World Bank to set up micro-lending schemes for entrepreneurs and SMEs so they can actually get the finance to do business with us.
So, within your community engagement strategy, how is Africa Oil currently monitoring and evaluating the effectiveness of that particular type of engagement with communities?
I think at the moment we're at a very early stage of that monitoring. It's a very direct relationship. We've set up a wide range of stakeholder assessment meetings where we go back to the same communities we've been before, try and ensure that what we said we're going to do we have done. Are there concerns about the way we've done things? It's a very internal mechanism at the moment. I think what we're going to want to do is build on that. So we're at an early stage of exploration. I think if we move into the appraisal and development phase, and it looks like we're going to be in these areas longer, we're going to want to bring in some sort of third-party assistance to help us ensure that we're actually meeting all the requirements of those communities. We're just introducing a new grievance procedure with our partner Tullow in Turkana. So there's community information offices that people can go to register their grievances, concerns, or raise questions. There's going to be a hotline that people can call. There's going to be an SMS system, but there's also going to be the traditional sort of outreach, the barazas, the town hall meetings. And I think there's going to be no one solution to ensuring that we're actually doing what we say we're going to do. So we need to put all of those activities in place. And I think the combined effect should help us know whether we're meeting our targets. The next stage probably is then perhaps to bring in a third party to then start doing some of that monitoring on our behalf.
And Alex, you mentioned the importance of social investment and working with communities to maximize benefits. What exactly are you doing, or is there any plan to empower communities to better engage with companies?
Yes, I think that's a really interesting subject. I'm very much of the view that companies have a key role to play in this, but I'm also very strongly of the view that other people have to up their game in these areas as well. The government, the civil society, bilateral donors, international organisations, we've all got a role to play here. It shouldn't just be left to the companies to do this. And in fact, I think that would be the wrong thing to do, to leave it to the companies. Actually, there are others with better expertise and better knowledge of how to do these things. Companies have a role, so we have a direct relationship with the local communities where we can identify that local communities are being excluded from our business activities. I think we have to step in. We have to help them access financing, we have to help them develop business skills training, we have to help them understand what an international industry requires. And I think what we've got to remember is some of the areas we're working in northern Kenya, they've never had any form of modern commercial activity in those areas. These are traditionally rural farming or pastoralist communities, and we're suddenly asking them to be able to bid for and procure contracts for an international industry that's very heavily regulated in terms of quality and health and safety, and those are requirements we have to then impose upon the local communities. I'll give you an example. When we ask for drivers for light vehicles, not only do they have to be able to drive, they have to be able to drive to an international standard set by the oil and gas producers. They also have to understand defensive driving, they have to understand the use of roll cages and other sort of activities. That's not something that traditionally has been needed in northern Kenya, so we have to help raise that level of understanding and skill set. But I do go back to my initial point that if we're talking about really maximising opportunities and how to ensure that communities can greatly benefit from this, I think civil society has a role to play in how you help empower the communities. And it's not just empowering communities to ensure they don't get ripped off by companies. That's an important part of it, but good companies shouldn't be trying to do that anyway. It's all about how do the communities ensure that their voice is heard within the governance structures. We're going through a complicated system of implementing devolution in Kenya at the moment. A lot of people feel their voices are not being heard. There's a lot more political players in an area like northern Kenya at the moment. You've got senators, you've got governors, you've got members of parliament, you've got members of the county assembly. How do the communities ensure that their voices are being heard by those democratically elected leaders who are then the ones who are responsible for ensuring that not only commercial activity like ours, but donor activity and community development plans and all of those things work for the benefit of the community. So community empowerment is essential. I don't believe it's an oil and gas issue. I think it's a wider governance issue, and therefore I think there's a lot of other people that need to be playing a role there.
Thank you, Alex, so much for your participation and your reflections this morning.
No, my pleasure.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.